He was not the loudest child, nor the most confident. While other boys shouted in the playground and ran across fields, he preferred to sit quietly somewhere alone, listening to sounds most people ignored. He heard music everywhere, in the wind brushing leaves, in footsteps on the road, in raindrops tapping the window. To others, it was only noise. To him, it was rhythm. It felt like life whispered to him through sound, gently telling him that his heart belonged to music. At first, no one noticed. They thought he was just a silent boy who liked being by himself. But he was not silent inside. Inside him, there was a fire, a spark, something waiting to grow. He never told anyone about it. Some things are too precious to share too early. Instead, he kept his passion tucked safely inside his chest, like a secret treasure only he knew about. One day, he heard a piano for the very first time. It didn't come from a music class or a concert, it came from a neighbor's open window. Someone was playing softly, carefully, like telling a story through notes instead of words. The boy stood still, frozen by the sound. His heart felt warm, like it finally found something it had been searching for without knowing. He kept listening until the music stopped, and when it ended, he felt something new, longing. He wanted more. He wanted to hear it again, feel it again, understand it, become part of it. But he had no piano. His family didn't own such things. They earned just enough to live, not enough to spend on instruments. So he listened from a distance, every day hoping the neighbor would play again. When the music started, he would leave whatever he was doing and stand near the window quietly, eyes closed, letting every note fall into his heart like rain on dry soil. Soon, he began imagining himself behind those keys, pressing them softly, creating music instead of only listening. He didn't know the notes, didn't know the technique, but he knew the feeling, and sometimes feeling is more powerful than knowledge. He started copying the motion of piano players, using anything he could find: his desk, the edge of the bed, even the dining table when no one watched. He placed his fingers gently, tapping like keys, pretending he was performing in front of hundreds of people, though in reality he sat alone in a quiet room. That imagination was his stage, and his silence was his audience. Every night when others slept, he would sit with a small stool near the bedside and move his fingers in the air, mimicking melodies he remembered. He hummed softly to guide his hands, teaching himself rhythm without realizing it. His parents thought he was just daydreaming, wasting time. They didn't understand that dreams are never a waste, they are seeds. He grew attached to that invisible piano. He woke up thinking about it, walked through the day imagining it, went to sleep dreaming of it. He didn't talk to anyone about it because he feared they would laugh or call it childish. But inside, he was building something powerful, passion mixed with patience, curiosity mixed with desire. Sometimes he sat in school and tapped his fingers under the desk, forming silent tunes that only he could hear. Teachers scolded him for not paying attention, but they didn't know his mind was composing music no one else could imagine. He wasn't distracted. He was focused on something greater, something pure. He believed music was living inside him like a heartbeat, and every day it grew louder. He liked the way the piano sounded, gentle yet deep, soft yet strong. It reminded him that people can be quiet but still powerful just like him. Everyone else saw an ordinary boy, but inside him was something extraordinary. He had no instrument, no teacher, no training, but he had a spark. A spark that didn't need approval to burn. A spark that didn't need permission to grow. A spark that waited for its moment patiently. And though no one knew it yet, that small, hidden spark was strong enough to one day light up an entire room. He didn't know how or when. He only knew that he wanted to play. He wanted to feel real keys beneath his fingers, not just imagination. He wanted sound, echo, depth, the kind that fills a room and silences everything else. The kind that speaks when words cannot. He had never touched a real piano, but he loved it more than anything he ever held. Isn't that what true passion is, loving something before you even touch it? He didn't need applause or encouragement. He didn't need people to believe in him. His dream lived without anyone's approval. It lived because he cared. And sometimes one heart is enough to keep a dream alive. He kept practicing silently, hoping that someday, somehow, the world would give him one chance. Just one moment where he could sit in front of a real piano and let the music inside him escape into the air. He didn't know that one day that moment would come. He didn't know that one day the same world that ignored him would turn to look shocked, silent, amazed. He didn't know that one performance would change everything. For now, he had only a spark, but sparks become flames, and flames become light. And light, when given space, can blind the whole world. As the boy grew a little older, his spark began to shine brighter, but the world around him didn't notice. People saw him as ordinary, maybe even less than others, quiet, shy, lost in his own world. They never guessed what was happening inside him. They never imagined that every night, while they slept peacefully, a small dream inside him was growing silently like a seed waiting for sunlight. One day at school, he finally gathered the courage to talk about music. He told a classmate that he wanted to learn the piano, not just play it, but truly master it. He spoke softly, eyes bright with hope. But instead of encouragement, he received laughter. "You, piano." The boy paused, pretending it didn't hurt. "You can't even talk loud properly," another student teased. Their words were sharp like cold wind in winter. He smiled weakly, even though something inside him cracked a little. Not because they doubted him, but because a tiny part of him hoped anyone would say, "You can do it." But no one did. The next day he tried telling a teacher. Surely adults would understand. They were wiser, kinder, more patient. He waited after class, walked up slowly and said in a small voice, "Sir, I want to learn piano one day. I want to play on stage." The teacher looked at him with amused eyes, not unkind but unbelieving. "Music isn't easy. Many talented children practice for years. You should focus on regular studies instead." Once again he nodded, thanked the teacher politely and walked away with a heavy heart. No anger, no complaint, just a soft sadness. He wasn't upset that people doubted him. He was upset because no one saw what he felt. His talent lived inside him quietly, like a song no one could hear. At home, it wasn't much different. His family was busy with work, bills, daily struggles. They loved him, but they didn't understand dreams that lived inside silence. When he once mentioned getting a piano someday, his father laughed kindly. "A piano? We can't even afford a bicycle right now." His mother smiled and stroked his hair. "It's good to dream, but sometimes life needs you to be practical." They weren't cruel, they were realistic. But sometimes realism crushes dreams more deeply than insults. Still, the boy didn't stop. Even in disappointment, he carried music inside him like a secret flame. He continued practicing invisible keys on tabletops, desks, his own knees. He hummed tunes under his breath during lunch breaks. Teachers thought he was distracted, but he was actually focused, just not on textbooks. Whenever he heard a piano in a commercial, a movie scene, a passing car's ringtone, he stopped for a moment, his heart tightening with longing. He wanted to reach through the sound and pull it into his hands. But the more he talked about it, the more people doubted him. Some said he wasn't serious. Some said he was dreaming too high, some laughed just to laugh. And slowly he learned to keep quiet. He stopped telling people about his dream. Not because he lost interest, but because he realized the world does not trust what it cannot see. People believe results, not passion. They believe talent only after it shows itself. He promised himself that one day he would show them. The more they laughed, the more determined he became. The more they doubted, the stronger he grew. The quieter they expected him to be, the louder his dreams became inside. At night he practiced longer. His fingers moved faster, more confident, more rhythmic. His imaginary piano began to sound real in his mind, each key, each note, each mistake and correction. He trained without teachers, without lessons, without applause. His only motivation was the fire inside his own heart. Sometimes, while practicing, he would look at the ceiling and whisper to himself, "They don't believe now, but one day they will watch." He wasn't angry, he wasn't bitter. He simply understood that belief comes after proof. And he didn't have proof yet, only passion. So he kept building proof with every invisible note he pressed. At school, when others chatted loudly, he sat silently, practicing finger patterns below the desk. When other children played or wasted time, he imagined songs that didn't exist yet. When someone laughed at him, he just smiled because he knew something they didn't. He was preparing for the day when laughter would turn into awe. The boy realized an important truth. The world doesn't laugh because you cannot do it. The world laughs because you haven't done it yet. And that small word, "yet," is what kept him going. He wasn't ready to perform, not yet. He wasn't recognized, not yet. He wasn't believed, not yet. But he knew deep, deep inside that a day would come when he would sit in front of a real piano and let his music speak for him. A day when those who doubted him would fall silent. A day when laughter would stop, not because of shame, but because of shock. For now he kept practicing, kept dreaming, kept believing quietly, faithfully, patiently. Because every great story has a chapter where no one believes. And that chapter was his beginning. There came a time when the boy finally understood something important. If no one believed in him, then he would have to believe in himself enough for everyone. And so, he stopped waiting for approval. He stopped hoping someone would teach him. Instead, he began to train himself quietly, secretly, patiently. His room became his music school. He didn't have a real piano, only a flat table and imagination, but he turned them into instruments. His fingers danced across empty surfaces like they were keys made of ivory. He practiced scales without sound, chords without feedback, rhythm without a metronome. Some might have called it foolish. He called it preparation. Many nights when the world slept, he stayed awake under a small, dim light. With tired eyes and steady fingers, he built his skill note by note in silence. Outside his window, crickets sang. Inside his room, a dream grew, soundless to others, beautiful to him. He watched videos when he could, learning finger placements, body movements, hand angles. He replayed them again and again until the shapes became memory. Sometimes he would pause and place his fingers on the table exactly as he saw, copying every detail. It didn't sound like music, but it felt like progress. He knew he wasn't like children who had teachers or expensive keyboards. He was alone in his journey, but he never felt lonely because music walked with him. He spent hours trying to understand how a simple melody could turn into something powerful. He hummed softly to guide himself, teaching his fingers to follow his voice. At first, the movement was slow, uncertain, like a bird learning to fly. But with time, his fingers began to glide smoothly, confidently. He corrected himself without anyone's help. He discovered harmonies without books. Every mistake made him better. Sometimes he failed badly. His hands cramped, his rhythm broke, his patience cracked. In those moments he felt small, like maybe everyone was right and he was only chasing a shadow. But then he would breathe deeply, close his eyes and hear the piano in his mind, not as a distant dream, but as a sound waiting for him. And he would continue. He didn't need applause or recognition. His reward was the slow improvement only he could see. Each night he finished practice with fingers numb but heart full, proud, quietly proud. No one outside that room knew what was happening. At school, he still remained the quiet boy, unnoticed, average, invisible in a crowd. When others joked or talked loudly, he only smiled and kept his dream hidden behind his teeth. A secret melody lived inside him like a heartbeat. He didn't share it because he wanted the world to hear it when it was ready, not before. There were moments when self-doubt attacked like a storm. He would look at his hands and wonder if talent without opportunity was useless. At times, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if effort without guidance could ever reach greatness. But then he would sit up, place his hands on the table again and start practicing, because even doubts cannot stop someone who continues moving. One evening, rain poured outside like music from the sky. The boy sat by his window, fingers tapping the sill softly, matching the raindrops. Tap, 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 tap. It sounded like rhythm, like timing, like practice being gifted to him by nature itself. For the first time, he didn't feel alone in his silent training. He felt connected to sound, to timing, to the world. He realized skill doesn't always grow in noise. Sometimes it grows best in quietness where mistakes echo louder and learning cuts deeper. The more he practiced, the more his dream sharpened inside him. He began to imagine not just playing piano, but performing, sitting under bright lights, sharing music with a room full of people. He pictured faces stunned, voices hushed, hearts moved. He pictured applause not because he needed it, but because he earned it. He practiced for that future. One day, while everyone believed he was nothing special, he sat in his room, fingers flying across invisible keys faster than ever. His movements were no longer hesitant. They were confident, smooth, full of meaning. The spark he once hid inside had grown into a quiet flame. He smiled to himself not because of praise, but because he knew something powerful. He was becoming ready. Ready for the moment life would open a door. Ready for the day mockery would turn into silence. Ready for the chance that once felt impossible. He practiced in silence so that one day, his music would speak loudly enough for all the world to hear. When others slept, he prepared. When they laughed, he practiced. When they doubted, he trained harder. He was building his moment one invisible note at a time. No one believed in him yet. But belief is not needed when progress is happening quietly. Because a seed doesn't ask for permission to grow, it just grows. And his talent was growing. Soon, the world would know. Time continued to move, and with it, his skill grew, but no one knew. All they saw was the same quiet boy, the one who rarely spoke and always watched from the corners. They didn't know he was preparing for something bigger than words. They didn't know his silence was filled with music. Then one morning, news spread through school. A talent event was going to be held. Musicians, dancers, singers, all would get a chance to perform on stage. It was the kind of event people would talk about for weeks, maybe months. For others, it was entertainment. For him, it was a doorway, not just a stage, a chance. The chance he had been waiting for. The poster hung on the notice board, bold letters shining under the sunlight. Students gathered around, excited, chatting about what they would do, what they would wear, who would win. He stood behind them quietly, heart beating fast, eyes locked on the word performance like it was calling out to him. His fingers tingled with anticipation. This could be it, his first real moment. That afternoon, he approached the teacher handling the event, hands slightly trembling but voice steady enough to prove he was serious. "Sir, I want to play piano in the event." The teacher looked at him surprised, confused, almost amused. "You, piano, do you even know how to play?" "I'm learning," he answered softly, but soft answers don't convince loud doubts. Students nearby overheard and smirked. "He thinks he can play. Maybe he will press keys randomly and call it music." Laughter followed him like a shadow as he walked away. It wasn't loud laughter, but it was sharp enough to hurt. It sliced into his confidence, not deep enough to kill it, but deep enough to burn. Still, that evening, as he sat alone in his room, the laughter replayed in his mind. But instead of breaking him, it fueled him. He practiced double the time that night, fingers stiffing, back aching, but heart on fire. He told himself something important: if they laugh today, one day they will listen. And so he signed up for the event, even though many didn't take him seriously. They believed he was wasting a slot, wasting time, wasting effort. He could feel eyes on him everywhere he went: curious eyes, doubtful eyes, mocking eyes. But the boy who once stayed silent now spoke with belief, even if only inside himself. The day of rehearsal came. Performers entered the hall confidently, carrying guitars, flutes, microphones, music sheets. He carried nothing. No instrument, no book, no backup, just belief, invisible but heavier than anything others brought. When it was his turn to sit at the piano, whispers filled the room. He can't do it. This will be funny. Watch, he will mess up in seconds. Their words were like cold rain falling hard, but he had stood through storms before. With slow steps, he walked to the piano, the same instrument he had loved from distance, imagined from afar, practiced for without ever touching. He sat, his hands hovered above the keys like butterflies unsure of landing. The room grew quiet, but not respectfully. They were waiting to see him fail, waiting to laugh, waiting to confirm their belief that he was just a dreamer, not a doer. He pressed one key. It felt cold, real, alive. The sound that came out was not perfect. It was shaky, soft, nervous, but it was enough. It was his first real note. His dream had finally touched reality, but then something happened. His mind froze, his hands stiffened. The years of silent practice suddenly felt distant, unreachable. The room waited. A moment of hesitation stretched into eternity. Someone giggled. Another whispered loudly enough to be heard. He didn't even learn properly. He got up slowly, heart sinking. Not because he failed, but because he realized he was not ready yet. The teacher asked him quietly if he was sure he wanted to perform in the final event. He nodded. Yes. His voice did not shake, his spirit did not break. He walked out of the hall with something stronger than success: determination. His first touch with the piano was imperfect, incomplete, uncomfortable, but it awakened something fierce inside him. He didn't avoid the laughter, he walked through it. He didn't shrink from doubt, he absorbed it. He didn't quit, he grew. That night he practiced again, harder than he ever had. His fingers were sore, his eyes heavy, but his heart was wide awake. Sometimes pain is proof that effort is real. Sometimes struggle is the sign that you're closer than ever before. He knew now the stage would either break him or make him. There was no middle. So he prepared for the final event like it was war. He couldn't erase the doubt around him, but he could build strength inside him. Soon the day would come. Soon he would sit down again. And when he did, the same people who laughed, whispered, doubted, would fall silent. The day of the performance approached slowly, but it felt like it was racing at him. Every sunrise reminded him that he was one step closer to standing before everyone, not as the quiet boy they knew, but as the boy who believed in himself when no one else did. He practiced harder with each passing day. His fingers never rested. Even during meals, he tapped softly on the table, practicing rhythm without thinking. He breathed music. He lived music. He became music. Nights were long, but determination was longer. Sometimes he practiced until his hands trembled and his eyes struggled to stay open. Still, he kept going. The memory of laughter replayed in his mind like fuel. Each insult had become a note, each doubt had become a chord, each rejection had become rhythm. He was building a song out of all the pain they gave him. And then, the day arrived. The hall was decorated beautifully, with golden lights and velvet curtains. Rows of chairs waited for people who would soon fill the room with noise and expectations. Performers dressed in confidence walked around proudly, instruments polished, voices warmed up, smiles shining. He walked quietly among them, unnoticed like always, but this time he carried something they didn't. He carried a fire burning inside. He sat backstage, hands on his lap, feeling his heartbeat through his fingers. He wasn't nervous, he was ready. Ready not just to perform, but to prove, to himself, to everyone. His reflection stared back from a glass window, calm eyes, thin smile, quiet determination. One by one, performers went on stage. The audience clapped eagerly, cheered, laughed, enjoyed. He listened from behind the curtain, fingers moving unconsciously as if playing invisible keys. His turn was getting closer. Every applause felt like thunder rolling toward him. The announcer called his name. For a moment, silence filled his mind. Everything around him blurred. He stood, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. The curtain opened like a gate to destiny. He walked slowly across the stage floor, each step echoing like a heartbeat. People in the audience stared, some curious, some confused, some amused. There were whispers. That's the quiet boy. He couldn't even play well at rehearsal. This will be interesting. Their expectations were low, painfully low. But that meant his victory could be immense. He reached the grand piano, the instrument he once only dreamed of touching. It gleamed under the lights like a star fallen to earth. He sat before it gently, like a believer kneeling before something holy. His fingers hovered above the keys. The room waited. This was the moment everything depended on. In that second, he remembered everything, his invisible practice. the laughter. The rejection, the night he almost gave up. The moment he chose to keep going, he closed his eyes. His mind flooded with music, not practiced songs, but something deeper, something born from emotion, struggle, hope. He let his hands settle, one breath in, one breath out, and then he began to play. The first notes were soft, careful, like footsteps of a child learning to walk, but his fingers remembered. The hours, the nights, the silent training, it all returned to him like a friend. The melody grew stronger, smoother, clearer. His hands moved with surprising confidence, as if they were not his but guided by something greater, his passion. The room slowly fell quiet. Whispers stopped, smirks faded, eyes widened. The same students who laughed now stared, frozen. Teachers leaned forward. The hall changed from noise to silence, from doubt to awe. They had expected a joke, but what they got was beauty. He kept playing. A joke, but what they got was beauty. He kept playing. The music rose like a river swelling under moonlight, gentle yet powerful. Each note carried emotion, pain where they doubted him, strength where he stood alone, hope where he continued practicing in the dark. His music wasn't perfect, but it was alive, filled with heart, filled with truth. He wasn't just pressing keys, he was telling a story without words. His story. A story they all had ignored. The room listened like the world finally paused. No one moved, no one spoke. Even those who wanted to mock him sat frozen, because talent, when real, can silence anything. He reached the climax of his performance, hands moving faster, confidence rising like fire. It was no longer about proving them wrong. It was about proving himself right. He felt light, free, powerful. With one final sweep of the keys, the last note rang out, long, warm, echoing like a promise kept. And then the room stayed silent, not with doubt, with disbelief, with admiration. For the first time in his life, silence felt like victory. Within seconds, applause erupted. Loud, unstoppable, growing with every clap. People stood, people cheered, people watched him with awe. Those who laughed now respected. Those who doubted now regretted. He looked up, eyes shining. He didn't just play the piano, he stunned them. He changed everything. He proved that even the quietest talent can roar like thunder when given one chance. And that thunder had just begun. When the applause thundered through the hall, the boy didn't move at first. He simply sat there, fingers still resting lightly on the keys, like they were afraid to let go of the moment they finally earned. The sound of clapping rushed over him like a wave, warm enough to melt every cold memory of doubt he'd carried for years. He slowly lifted his hands from the piano. For a long moment, he just stared at them, the same small hands that had danced over tabletops, school desks, wooden furniture, and invisible keyboards in the silence of his room. These were the hands they laughed at. These were the hands they said would never play, and now these hands had changed everything. He stood up gently, almost unsure if the loud applause was really for him. But it continued, louder, stronger, more sincere. People weren't clapping because they had to. They were clapping because they had felt something, because the music had touched them in a way words couldn't. In the first row, the same teacher who once dismissed him sat frozen, disbelief in his eyes slowly turning into pride. Students who mocked him were staring wide-eyed, mouths parted, like the world they knew had just been rewritten in front of them. Some parents leaned forward, whispering to each other, asking who the boy was, how he learned, where he came from. He had walked in as a nobody. He was walking out as a story. The announcer returned to the stage, voice trembling with excitement. What you witnessed was not just talent, it was a miracle. The hall cheered again. The boy lowered his head in a small bow. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud. It was gentle, humble, the kind of bow given by someone who wasn't seeking praise, only expressing gratitude. As he walked off the stage, something unexpected happened. People moved aside for him. The same children who once teased him earlier now stepped back with respect. Some reached out for a handshake. Some simply stared, speechless. Others smiled shyly, as if afraid to disturb the glow around him. He didn't speak much. Words could never describe what music already said for him. He simply nodded softly to those who congratulated him, eyes shining with quiet satisfaction. One student approached him slowly, the same one who laughed the loudest before. You were incredible," he admitted, voice small. The boy smiled kindly, no anger, no arrogance, only warmth. "Thank you," he said. Because victory feels greater when forgiveness follows it. A teacher stopped him near the exit. "You learned all that alone." He nodded gently. The teacher shook his head in astonishment. "With practice, you could become something great." The boy did not say it aloud, but he already knew he was becoming something great. Not because of applause, not because of praise, but because he never gave up when no one believed. As he walked home that day, the world felt different. The streets looked the same, the sky the same, but he was not the same. Every step felt lighter, like he was walking on his own melody. The sound of applause still echoed in his ears like a heartbeat. He carried it with him not as pride, but as proof. Proof that dreams do not need permission. Proof that effort grows even in silence. Proof that one moment can erase years of doubt. When he reached home, he placed his hand on the door before entering, breathing deeply. He could still feel the piano keys beneath his fingertips, cold, smooth, unforgettable. Inside, his parents looked at him curiously. They had heard from neighbors, from friends, from children running home filled with excitement. His mother's eyes glistened as she asked in a trembling voice, almost afraid of the answer, "Did you really play today?" The boy nodded. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears filling her eyes. His father stared at him not with confusion anymore, but with respect. A kind of respect that forms only when something unbelievable turns true. He didn't need to explain what happened. He didn't need to describe applause. One look in his eyes told them everything. That night he couldn't sleep, but not because he was nervous, because he was alive. Every breath he took felt like a song. Every blink replayed the moment he stunned the room. He lay on his bed thinking of what came next, because this was not the peak of his story. This was only the beginning. Tomorrow new people would talk. Tomorrow more opportunities might come. Tomorrow someone else might laugh at another dreamer. But maybe they would hesitate this time, because they had witnessed what happens when talent is underestimated. The world had been stunned tonight, and soon the world would remember his name. The next day, whispers moved through school like wind through leaves. Everywhere the boy walked, eyes followed him, not with doubt this time, but with curiosity, respect, even a little awe. It was strange for him. For years he moved like a shadow in the background, unnoticed, often ignored. Now everywhere he stepped, people paused, watched, wondered. Some looked at him with wide eyes, still replaying the performance in their heads. Others approached in small groups, pretending they just happened to be walking near him, hoping to hear even one word about how he did it. Students who once laughed no longer smirked. Instead, they looked nervous, unsure how to face the boy they once dismissed. He didn't change, but everything around him had. During break, a group of classmates approached him slowly. They weren't sure how to speak to someone they had underestimated so deeply. "You were amazing yesterday," one of them said quietly. Another added, "We never knew you could do that." A third whispered, "You proved us wrong." He smiled softly, not with pride, not with revenge, but with kindness. He nodded and thanked them politely. He didn't let ego grow inside him. He knew that greatness shines brightest when paired with humility. The teacher who once told him music wasn't for him called him to the staff room later that day. The teacher sat thoughtfully, hands clasped, eyes gentle. "I misjudged you," he admitted honestly. "What you played was not easy. It takes real dedication. I'm proud of you." For the first time, the boy felt seen. Not only as a student, not as someone quiet sitting in the back, but as someone with value, talent, potential. A spark of confidence bloomed inside him, not loud, not arrogant, but steady, warm. After school, he walked to the hall again, the same one where he once stood outside hoping for a chance. Now he walked inside freely. People didn't question him, they greeted him. A few even asked for tips on improving their music. The shift was big. The world hadn't changed, but the way it looked at him had. He sat at the piano again. This time he didn't tremble. His fingers rested like they belonged there. When he began to play softly, the sound flowed gently through the room, calming, soothing. A few students gathered around the door, silently listening. Some closed their eyes, some smiled. He wasn't performing, but they listened anyway. That was the moment he realized something incredible, before he had to ask for a chance. Now people came to hear him without being invited. He finished the piece and stood up, not expecting applause, but it came anyway, quiet, respectful. The kind of applause that means you touch something inside us. The boy realized the stage didn't give him value, his effort did. Later that evening, his teacher approached him with a formal tone, almost nervous themselves. "We want you to represent the school in the district music competition," the teacher said. "You've earned it." The boy blinked, surprised. The same school that barely noticed him now trusted him enough to carry their name publicly. It felt unreal, like walking in a dream he had once only imagined in the dark of night. When he went home, he placed his hands on the table where he once practiced invisible notes. He stared at those worn edges, the marks his fingers had left. A small smile lifted his face. This was where it started, in silence, without applause, without belief. He whispered softly to himself, almost like speaking to the past. "They don't laugh anymore." He wasn't saying it with pride, but with gratitude. Laughter had shaped him, pressure had strengthened him, silence had trained him. Without all that pain, maybe his music wouldn't have carried the same soul. As days passed, more people came to hear him practice. Some sat quietly for hours. Others asked him about his journey. A few even apologized for doubting him. But he didn't want apologies, he only wanted to inspire. He told them gently, "You don't need people to believe in you first. You just need to believe enough until they have to." His words touched others the way piano keys once touched him, softly, deeply. He noticed some kids who never dared to try anything new now looking at him with hope. Maybe they were thinking, if he could do it, maybe I can too. And that realization made him happier than applause ever could. He didn't just change their opinion, he changed their imagination. The school that once questioned him now called him talented. The classmates who laughed were now his silent admirers. The teacher who doubted was proud to guide him. He had not only stunned the room, he had awakened it. Everywhere he went now, he walked with quiet dignity. No noise, no show, just music in his heart. He had learned something valuable. Respect doesn't come when you demand it. Respect comes when you earn it. He earned it, not by talking but by playing, not by arguing but by proving, not by asking but by becoming. And now everyone listened. Time passed, but the memory of that performance never faded. It remained alive like a flame inside him, steady, warm, impossible to extinguish. Every morning he woke up with a stronger purpose. Every night he slept with music echoing through his mind, like destiny whispering to him gently. He was no longer the boy people doubted. He was no longer the one they laughed at. He was no longer invisible. He had become someone who proved that silent effort speaks louder than words ever could. But success did not make him arrogant, it made him humble. Instead of walking with pride, he walked with gratitude. Instead of looking down at those who doubted him, he forgave them. Because he knew something powerful now. People don't laugh because you are weak. People laugh because they cannot see your strength yet. He understood this and it made him kind. One afternoon, months after the performance, he was invited to play again, this time in a much larger hall, with many more people, including musicians from other places who had never heard of him. The audience was bigger, the expectations higher, but he was ready. He sat at the new piano with calm confidence. His fingers touched the keys like they were old friends. This time when he played, he didn't play to prove anything. He didn't play to silence doubt. He played to share everything music had given him. The room filled with sound, soft, emotional, bright like sunlight breaking through clouds. His music carried hope, courage, resilience. It carried nights of silent practice, days of laughter he ignored, moments he nearly gave up but didn't. It carried the story of a boy who rose from doubt into brilliance. When he finished, the hall erupted again in applause, louder than before, not just loud but loving. People stood up like waves rising in an ocean. They clapped with their hearts, not just with their hands. Some even cried softly, wiping tears quickly. His music reached them in places words never reached. He bowed, smiled, and walked off stage, calm, fulfilled, free. After the show, a little kid ran toward him, small hands, big eyes, heart full of excitement. "I want to learn piano too," the child said, breathing fast. "But people say I can't, like they said to you." What? The boy who once stood alone now stood as someone to look up to. He bent down, placed a gentle hand on the child's shoulder, and replied, "You can do anything, just don't stop, even if no one believes you yet." What? The child smiled, the same kind of smile he once carried secretly, and in that moment he realized his story had become more than his own. It had become light for others, a path for those afraid to start. That night at home, he sat again at the same table where it all began, the place he practiced silently, ignored, unseen. He placed his hands gently on the wooden surface and remembered the first time he pretended it was a piano. His fingers traced old, invisible patterns. He smiled not out of pride but out of love for the journey. He whispered to the empty room, "Thank you for not giving up." The silence answered him like a friend. He had learned that talent is not what you have at the start. Talent is what you create when no one is watching. He learned that dreams grow in darkness, as long as the dreamer keeps working. He learned that respect doesn't come from talking. It comes from proving, from persistence, from heart. He became someone others admired, not because he changed, but because he revealed what he always had inside. People now knew his story, a boy ignored, laughed at, doubted, who stood on a stage and turned disbelief into applause. His journey became an example, a reminder to every young dreamer who felt small. He didn't win with anger. He didn't win with words. He won with music, effort, patience, and belief. And that kind of victory lasts forever. Long after that day, people would still talk about him, not just as a pianist, not just as a talented boy, but as someone who proved something extraordinary. When no one trusts your talent, trust yourself twice as much. Because sometimes the world laughs first, but it listens later. Sometimes the room doubts you, but one day that same room will applaud you. Sometimes people don't believe, until your work forces them to. And the boy, with gentle strength in his heart, now walked into every new day with confidence. Not loud confidence. Quiet confidence, the kind that comes from knowing what you are capable of. He did not need validation anymore. He did not need approval. He only needed music. Because the world that once laughed now listened, and he wasn't finished. He was just beginning. He was just beginning.